It's been an interesting day up here in Northeast Indiana talking to 122nd Fighter Wing out at Bearfield, talking to economic development people, defense cluster people, a whole number of groups that are essentially are the ones that provide the jobs for Hoosiers. And obviously the number one challenge facing the Congress, facing the administration, and facing the American people is getting this economy moving again and getting people back to work. There's some exciting things happening here. Private industry is stepping up in unique ways, trying to address this issue. We want to make sure they have the policies in place that create growth, that don't overtax, don't overregulate, don't overspend at the federal level. That's the challenge I'm going to be facing as I go forward to join the Congress in January, and that's going to be my #1 priority. Number 2 is keeping America safe. We have this defense cluster here in Northeast Indiana that's very significant, beyond what most people's understanding of what it contributes, not only jobs, but also to our national security and national defense. I want to do what I can to help promote that in Washington, but promote that as a key part of our national security system. So today is a learning experience in Northeast, getting back on track and up to speed with all that's going on here. There's some encouraging signs for the future, and it's interesting to meet with all these people and learn about what they're doing and plans for the future, and I want to be as helpful as I can to them.
Is there any news to report based on any of the meetings you've had today? I mean, you mentioned the 122nd Fighter Wing.
Well, there's some significant improvements and increase in the type of defense efforts that come out of Indiana. I think when the first round of base closing came along and we shut down Fort Harrison and Grissom Air Force Base, people thought, well, that pretty much does it for Indiana. Kind of an untold story today is that Crane is thriving with over 6,000 researchers down there in southwestern Indiana. New Muscatatuck project is thriving. Atterbury has new legs. We have a defense cluster of industries here in Northeast Indiana. These people, we were talking about how we can use that cluster in synergy to attract more business, more jobs to this particular area. We have the Fighter Wing providing more than 1,000 positions out just south of town at the airport. So we can build on that, and I think as we look at the threats facing the country for the future, defense and information technology is going to be very, very important, and we want to make sure that this part of the country, Northeast Indiana, is a very vital part of that effort.
Talk about the WikiLeaks controversy a little bit, and your sense about how your reaction when you saw this happening and how you felt about that.
Well, I felt a great deal of frustration and anger. I mean, this is treason of the highest account. People are going to die because of these links, because names are being names, and people that have been sources of information for us in hostile areas are being identified in these cables. I think it's an attempt by an individual with an ideology to undermine our national security. And I think that ought to be pursued to the extent of the law, and whatever efforts need to be taken to close this set of leaks down needs to be taken.
Your sense for how close, or how likely it is that they'll actually find him, because they're looking for him right now?
They're looking, and they ought to keep looking, and I hope it takes a shorter amount of time than finding Osama bin Laden.
As far as while you were campaigning, you talked about healthcare reform and trying to get rid of that. Do you still plan to do that, and if so, how?
I plan to be a part of the effort to try to return to a blank page and start over with far more sensible healthcare reforms that don't break the budget and don't turn everything over to a federal government one-size-fits-all healthcare system. Whether that's repeal of the current bill that's in place, which I think we're going to try to make that effort. I don't anticipate the President will support that, or providing meaningful alternatives and going at it piecemeal. I think it needs to be addressed because it has not been accepted by the American people, by the medical industry and the healthcare industry, because it's dysfunctional. It is impossible to take 1/6 of the economy and put it in Washington's hands and say, we have the answers to all the problems here. We need to let the free market work better. There are areas we can address that need to be addressed, like pre-existing conditions and providing better insurance opportunities for people. But this proposal that was kind of jammed down our throats by a party that had total control of Washington is not the direction that we need to go, and I'm going to do what I can to join the effort to reform it.
And speaking of the president, when he was in town or in the area, y'all talked. What were y'all talking about then?
Well, he called me from Air Force One on the way here, and it was just simply a congratulatory call for winning the election. I thanked him for his congratulations. I told him that, of course, he's welcome in Indiana, as Vice President is welcome in Indiana. But I wanted to also share with him what I had learned in the 9 months of campaigning, what was on Hoosiers' minds. I said, you know, Mr. President, getting the economy moving again and getting people back to work is a goal that I'm going back to carry the voice of the Hoosier people to Washington. And I know that's a goal you share. And I hope that we can get some movement on that, because I think the last 2 years has not solved the problem, and I want to keep my efforts focused in that regard. So that was the extent of the conversation.
What does need to happen here in Northeast Indiana, specifically to tackle the unemployment issue? Obviously, this is the #1 issue on most everyone's minds. Probably a reason why Republicans did so well in the midterm elections. Talk a little bit about, you kind of talked a lot about that during your campaign season. As a newly elected senator, help voters, see that, help them understand what you feel like needs to be done here.
Well, I believe that in order to provide and promote growth in Northeast Indiana as well as in Indiana, we need national policies that will provide national growth. We need to get the tax rates in a way that our companies are competitive with overseas competitors. Right now, we pay much higher taxes. We need to stop running into such deep debt that it threatens our credit ratings. We've got to slow down the spending in Washington on the one hand, reform the tax code on another, keep taxes and regulations at a level where it doesn't stifle growth and, in fact, encourages growth. Those are policies that are directly opposite of what has been employed the last 2 years, and so I think we need to reverse those policies. And if we get those in place, then I would think we'll see a return to economic recovery, and that'll be of benefit to Indiana, which frankly is better positioned of any other state in the Midwest and many in the country. So I've said for months now, when economic growth returns through better policies in Washington, we will be a beneficiary of that here in Indiana, because we are a state with a AAA bond rating. We are a state that has business-friendly tax and regulatory policies, and we are a state very well positioned and fiscally sound. That's going to be where people want to locate their business and expand their business.
The Senate Republicans today pledged, I think 42 of them signed a letter saying that we'll block any bills until the Bush tax cuts are extended. Is that the right move in your mind?
Well, what they said was that they want action on this because they're going, on December 31 at midnight, every American is going to have a significant tax increase imposed on them. Business is going to have significant tax increases. Unless something is done about that, we're going to see another major hit on our economy. And for the Democrats to simply say, well, we have other issues that we want to deal with, what Republicans are saying is, let's get to the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem here is, are the American people and American businesses going to get a tax increase in January, or are these current rates in the tax code going to be extended? This amount of uncertainty is keeping businesses from making decisions about building, expanding, or hiring. It's keeping families from spending. Nobody knows what their income is going to be starting on January 1 unless Congress acts. And so it's, in my opinion, it is absolutely right for the Republicans to say to the president, look, let's focus on what has to be done instead of diddling around with a whole bunch of other issues here that can easily be handled in the next Congress.
We've got time for about 2 more questions, guys.
What will you be doing
Well, trying to set up an office in Washington, office in Indiana with collateral satellite offices, one of which will be here in Fort Wayne. Hire people and get good people available to get going right as we start in January. I can't start anything until January 5th with the swearing in. But also traveling around Indiana, continuing to talk to people, to business people, to others that hire, what are the problems, explain to them what it is that where I'm going to put my priorities. Just continue to represent the people of Indiana even though I'm not official yet.